Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Spartan Tailgate podcast. Last one before the season starts here. We're recording this here on Thursday night, so there's already some football going on. MSU plays Friday night, obviously. I'm joined, as always, by Dan Kilbridge. Dan, how you doing?
Doing well. Better than Steve Spurrier at the moment.
Yeah, that was something. 680 yards by South Carolina, by Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Oof.
Which, as Bob Wojnarowski pointed out, maybe that means that Johnny Manziel was just a product of the system.
Yeah, looks like a pretty good system, that's for sure. So, MSU plays Jacksonville State Friday night, obviously, on Big Ten Network, right? BTN?
BTN,
And,
oh yeah.
So we're going to start off this podcast. Final thoughts on the depth chart, which came out earlier this week with some surprises. We'll get into Jacksonville State preview stuff, and then we'll do a quick outlook on the rest of the season for MSU, the Big Ten, and maybe pick a couple games for this weekend. So we'll start off with that depth chart. Just kind of going down the line, Nick Hill shows up as the number 2 guy, and based on D'Antonio's comments at the press conference, seemed like he's pretty entrenched at that number 2 spot, which I think is surprising to a lot of people. You know, the guy has been around for a while and never really, broken through. And Jeremy Langford's obviously the number 1 guy, and you got some backups who have been promising or reportedly promising. But Dan, your thoughts on Nick Hill apparently having the number 2 spot locked up?
Yeah, I guess I was a little surprised. I thought that we'd see a lot of oars kind of littered throughout the 2 deep at running back. But no, they just went down the line and listed them. The one thing I will say is I don't really think the depth chart is a huge deal when it comes to running back, because D'Antonio's done this time and time again. He said it again on Tuesday. He's just going to ride the hot back. So
Yeah.
I guess what it means is, Nick Hill's first guy off the bench, and he'll get a look. But if D'Antonio doesn't like what he's doing, won't hesitate to go down the line. Personally, I have a hard time believing that Nick Hill can hold on to that number 2 job throughout the first couple of weeks. But I think he's a senior. He knows what to do and has probably earned the right to be that number 2 guy, and we'll see what he can do against Jacksonville State.
Yeah, and D'Antonio said he will try to get, Delton Williams in there. He's a different kind of running back for them. Madre London was pretty low on that depth chart. He was still listed, but you got to think, barring, a Langford injury, that we're probably not going to see him this year.
Yeah, I think one thing D'Antonio's talked about is just consistency and doing the little things at that job. Even things like ball security, that's huge for a freshman. And right now, it seems to me like they don't think he's quite ready to play. I'm sure he could and be fine, but I think that they look at him as a guy who would only get maybe 5 or 6 carries a game, and it's just not worth it to burn a shirt like that. So right now, looking at it, I do believe he'll redshirt, and I think that's probably the right call.
Yeah, not many other surprises on the offensive depth chart. McGarrett Kings is still listed behind R.J. Shelton, as he was at the beginning of camp.
Yep.
D'Antonio said he won't be missing any game time related to his arrest.
Well, he didn't say. What he said was it was sort of a poorly phrased question. He was asked if McGarrett Kings was available, and D'Antonio said yes, he is available. So I don't know that that's set in stone that he will play. I still think there's a chance that he won't. But yeah, either way, I don't think there's going to be any sort of public statement about it. If he doesn't play, he doesn't play, and that's what it is.
Okay. Offensive line is what we expected after Connor Cruce's injury. Looking pretty thin, pretty much no real game experience in the second string, whether it be Brian Allen at center or Miguel Machado at left tackle. But Brian Allen's a guy who, him and Malik McDowell were the only true freshmen on the 2 deep. And Dan, you wrote about Allen today about how he's looking unique for a freshman offensive lineman.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've said this before, but the reason I think he plays is that they lose two of those senior guards next year with Cruz and Travis Jackson. And that's generally what we've seen in D'Antonio's tenure is when they have a guy who's in the two deep and they think he can compete or become a starter the next year, they generally play him. That's what we saw with Max Bola as a true freshman. It's what we saw with Darian Hicks last year. Even though they didn't get a ton of plays, they were sort of groomed and just able to get used to it before moving into a starting role. And I do think this staff believes that Brian Allen can be a starter next year at one of those guard spots. But Brandon Clemens is interesting too. You know, we say a lot of these guys don't have experience beyond the starting five, which is true, but Clemens did play well at defensive tackle in the Rose Bowl last year, and Machado's got some JUCO experience too, so maybe not quite as thin as it appears to the naked eye, but yeah, definitely some questions to be answered there on Friday.
Is Cruz's recovery, is that still pretty much undisclosed? We'll know whenever D'Antonio says.
Yeah, I've kind of heard it might be longer than initially hoped, and I don't have anything solid on that yet, but it sounds to me like it could be into Big Ten play before he's available.
Okay, and moving
you just feel so bad for a guy like that who's worked his tail off as a walk-on to become a scholarship player, and then his senior year to finally become a starter, and it's all taken away from him a couple of weeks before the opener. Really feel for a guy like that.
Yeah, and a lot gets put on Cody Keeler now, who was that first guy off the bench. Now he's firmly at right tackle, and Donovan Clark moves to guard, which is a spot where people always kind of thought he might fit better because of his build. So it'll be really interesting to watch the right side of that offensive line on Friday. And on the other side of the ball, Lawrence Thomas in the starting spot at one of the defensive tackle spots. And D'Antonio threw out the Jarrell Worthy comparisons this week after Pat Narduzzi had previously. Former five-star recruit, battled injuries, battled finding a place to play early on in his career. I mean, do you believe the hype? Do you think we still got to wait and see? Because those are pretty big comparisons.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he's playing similarly to Jarrell Worthy in practice and individual drills. You know, he's always had the athleticism, so the Worthy comparisons to me don't really mean a whole lot because we've always known he was this physical specimen. I mean, he was a five-star recruit at linebacker and didn't move down into the line until a few weeks after he started here. And so, the athletic stuff, none of that really surprises me. It just kind of surprised me that the coaches would say that. Yeah. And to me, that's sort of giving him a vote of confidence, knowing that they're going to rely on him because with Damon Knox, when he was in the lineup, Thomas was still in that backup role, and it was, LT's got to grow up, and now's the time to seize that opportunity. And now they really don't have a choice. So I do think that was a calculated move on both of their parts to say, hey, we believe in you because they're counting on him as a starter, and we'll see how he does. It's just big that he was able to stay healthy throughout fall camp, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. I don't expect Jarrell Worthy right away, but who knows? We'll see.
And at linebacker, Mylan Hicks listed as a co-starter with Darian Harris at the star money, right? Money is the star now.
No. Sam is the money.
Sam's the money. So
Star is still the star.
Okay, Star is still the star. Mylan Hicks, Darian Harris, co-starters there. That seems like a situation, maybe a third down situation, or depending on the type of offenses they play, and we'll get into that more with the Jacksonville State preview. But sounds like another guy with a big vote of confidence, Mylan Hicks.
Yeah, it's definitely personnel related. And I talked to linebacker coach Mike Tressel about this for quite a while the other day. And yeah, basically they really like what Hicks can do against 3 and 4 receiver sets. He's aggressive. And they said, this kind of surprised me. Tressel said he's very quick to believe what he sees and attack kind of at the line of scrimmage, and there's no hesitation. He just goes for it. And he said that's something Darian Harris could do better, which surprised me a little bit because we hear so much about what a great, grasp he has of the scheme.
Yeah.
But I think Mylan Hicks, he's a guy with nothing to lose. He's a fifth-year senior. He's in a new position. It's his last chance. So, hey, why wouldn't you go out there just flying all over the place? It sounds like he's done that. And I think they kind of envision him as that Jarius Jones type of guy who actually played really well early last year before he got hurt. And
Another guy who was a senior defensive back who needed a place to play.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And so you look at a guy like that, it could be a really feel-good story if he comes out and makes plays, because he's a guy who, from what I understand, had considered transferring this offseason to a place where he could play more. And I think, with the teams on their schedule, you look at Oregon, Ohio State, Nebraska, a lot of up-tempo offenses, he could be a key guy in that third down package. And so that's clearly a personnel thing, but I think they felt like Mylan Hicks has played well enough to see his name in bold letters on the depth chart.
And, yeah, reading those quotes about him diagnosing and reacting quickly reminded me, at least it sounded a lot like Curtis Drummond. I think that's one of Drummond's greatest abilities is to react and attack. We'll see what Hicks does, because I think we'll get into more of it later, but I'm thinking we're going to see a lot of Hicks this weekend based on Jacksonville State's style of play, and even into next week at Oregon. So we'll see, though. At cornerback, it was odd to see R.J. Shelton and Monty Madaris, two wide receivers, listed there. Not necessarily because I don't believe that they're the third-string cornerbacks, but by putting them there, you're opening yourself up to the questions, which obviously came. But they again seem very confident in those guys. Obviously, it's probably would be a situation barring an injury. But do you think it could happen? Would they go with Shelton over, maybe pulling off a red shirt on a guy or something?
I guess, yeah. That's what leads me to believe that those redshirt freshmen aren't ready, or excuse me, those true freshmen aren't ready with Vayante Copeland and Jalen Watts-Jackson. Really didn't hear much about them this fall camp, and I don't think the staff would play them this season. So, yeah, I don't know. Harlan Barnett said that Shelton's a natural at cornerback. He's worked there some. Madaris has actually looked okay, too. And, these guys are athletes. I think you worry with a young guy like that about him really getting settled in somewhere, and sort of as opposed to having too much on his plate. Like, I think Tony Lippett early on in his career was sort of swimming, going back from receiver to defensive back and back again. Same thing with Micajah Reynolds a little bit. And then once those guys found their positions and stayed there, they were really effective. Now, there's no doubt R.J. Shelton is a receiver. This is just sort of a bonus. But, yeah, I think it says, one, that the true freshmen are not ready, and two, that those are athletic guys. And I think, crazy scenario where there's 4 injuries, sure, I think they could play either one of them.
And Demetrius Cox locked in at the nickelback spot there. Another guy you expect to see with the wide sets in third down situations. Anything to add on him? I know you wrote about him a little bit today or this week.
Yeah, he's a guy that you've always just kind of wondered what's holding him back, because physically on the field he looks as good as anyone. I think people thought he would play a lot earlier than he did. Now, obviously, playing behind Curtis Drummond and R.J. Williamson, there isn't a whole lot of room. But, we've been waiting anxiously to see what he can do, and I think the staff is going to be keeping a very close eye on him, as this is really his first big opportunity to contribute.
Now, I mentioned that Brian Allen and Malik McDowell are the only true freshmen in the 2-deep. Craig Evans was also a number 3 defensive tackle, and it sounded like he's going to play, or he's in the mix, or they plan on him being in the mix. Does it seem like those 3 guys are probably the only true freshmen that we'll see, barring unforeseen circumstances?
One other guy, I guess, would be Chris Fry because he's so good on special teams,
Okay.
and he really impressed in spring practice. Now, I think maybe didn't follow that up with as good a fall camp as people wanted to see, but Tressel said there's definitely still a chance that Fry plays. I guess still a chance that a third defensive tackle plays. D'Antonio sort of left that open, and I was really surprised that it was Craig Evans
Yeah.
and not Enoch Smith. And just because Craig Evans, he looks overweight when you look at him, but he apparently, and far be it for me to criticize people for being overweight. I'm lucky there's not a camera on me right now. But having said that, yeah, apparently he moves pretty well at that weight because all of a sudden, D'Antonio mentioned him a couple times, and it sounds like he's really ready to go. Other than that, yeah, I don't see maybe Montez Sweat at defensive end. Um, Even though I guess Evan Jones has apparently had a nice camp, but I think they're still talking about Sweat, Fry, and maybe even Monte Nicholson if something happens.
Yeah. So yeah, that pretty much does it for the depth chart. I guess we move on to Jacksonville State now, a team that's ranked number 8, I believe, in the preseason FCS poll. This is a team that set a boatload of school and conference offensive records a year ago. Their head coach, Bill Clark, took the UAB job, and offensive coordinator John Grass was promoted to head coach. 2 years ago, Grass was the head coach at Oxford High School in Alabama, and now he's going to be playing in front of 75,000 people against the Rose Bowl champions and one of the top defenses. So a quick rise for him, but he very much impressed as a coach last year. If you haven't checked out, Spartan Rocky, as usual, has some terrific preview stuff up on the site, SpartanTailgate.com. VIP if you've got that. Just great looks at numbers and offense and defense matchups and position personnel groups. Highly recommend that. Really good stuff there. I guess that's where we'll start, is going to be Jacksonville State's offense against MSU's defense. Jacksonville State plays a 3-4 type, so it'll be interesting to see how, especially the right side of that offensive line, reacts to different looks they're going to see. What sticks out to you, Dan, about this side of the ball?
Well, I think that. Well, and also speaking of Spartan Rocky, he astutely pointed out that this is a unique number 8 versus number 8 matchup. We've got both teams ranked number 8.
Game of the century.
Yeah, I think that's the key stat. But also, yeah, I think it's always tough when you've got a new coaching staff, as Jacksonville State does, especially in an opener. You just don't know exactly what to expect because there's tape on these coaches, obviously, but it's tape from different places, and they have a bunch of transfers coming in from these SEC schools. So just sort of a lot of unknowns, and that's why I think, Michigan State, it's really not about sort of diagnosing the defense at this point. Obviously, that plays a role in every game. But for them, I think it's more about their assignments and taking advantage of plays when they're presented, remaining calm. I know it's got to be tough a little bit to keep the emotions in check when you've waited all year and then Friday night comes and you're under the lights. It's got to be a long day for those players, and then all of a sudden they're flying out of the tunnel. So I think the key will be handling nerves and sort of early on recognizing what the defense is giving them. And that's where I think Connor Cook can take a step up this year. When you think back early last year, sort of just getting his feet wet as a young pup. And now he can look at what the defensive front is doing. Obviously, Jack Allen at center, there's no one better at him in terms of communicating what's going on with the defensive gaps. And so I think after those first couple series, it's going to be all about coming back to the coaches and saying, okay, we're doing this. They're going to have to diagnose things pretty quickly and then see what they can do to get away with that. And I think, just remaining calm and taking advantage is going to be the big key against this defense.
Yeah, I think the I guess the experience works two ways. You figure they know how to handle it, but do they get too cocky? I guess it depends on the outcome and which narrative we can assign to that. But obviously, every pass catcher other than Benny Fowler comes back. And Spartan Rocky pointed this out, which is a good point. A lot of FCS teams you play, they'll be undersized, but that's not the case with this Jacksonville State team. They've got a few SEC transfers, like you said, and they're pretty big up front. They go based on their depth chart, 281, 300, and 292 across. So these are some pretty big guys. So it'll be interesting to see that matchup, and then to see how the linebackers come in. And I have to imagine Jacksonville State will try to attack the right side of the line and test Keeler and Clark and see how that goes. And that's also going to put a lot on any tight ends. You wonder if MSU will put a tight end over on that side more often. It'll also Jeremy Langford will be big in the pass blocking game to read where things are going if the offensive line struggles with that. On the other side, this is Jacksonville State runs an Oregon type of offense, spread you out, run the ball, quarterback rush for I forgot how many.
Nearly nine. It was like
890
something. It was almost 900 yards.
And then they got a running back who had almost 30 touchdowns. So they've got some experience in that backfield, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how MSU's linebackers react to that, because this is for all three of them, maybe not Ed Davis, but in a starting role, first time they're starting in these positions. And they go up against an offense that will really challenge your ability to see the ball and make your reads with various misdirections and whatnot, which is why I wouldn't be surprised if we see Mylan Hicks more because of the personnel. He's obviously going to be faster than Darian Harris is, and if he reads and attacks well, like Coach Trussell said he does, that will be very valuable. And another guy you might see a lot could be Demetrius Cox, too. Because I don't think you're going to get this doesn't seem like the type of game where MSU is going to get a lot of sacks just because of how they run their offense. It's either a quick pass or it's a handoff or a dump or something like that. Yeah. So those defensive ends will have to seal the edges. If they get through and get a shot at the quarterback, that's good. But I think back to the Youngstown State game.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
Where it was just so many quick dumps off, dump off here, dump off there, and it seemed like MSU's defensive line couldn't. Seemed like they got a little frustrated with how that was going about. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because Shalik Calhoun comes in with all sorts of praise. If he starts off not slow, but if he's not getting to the quarterback, does he get a little frustrated? It'll be interesting to see how that works. And then it comes down to the linebackers making their reads, because MSU's been prone sometimes against these types of offenses for the linebackers to get sealed off if the defensive tackles don't do very well. I think about the Ohio State game. Now that's obviously a much better personnel, but Carlos Hyde is just carving them up in the middle, and Max Bullock kept getting sealed off because the tackles couldn't do more than hold a single block or something like that. So
it's in the thing about DeMarcus James, the tailback too, is he's a big boy. He's 220 pounds, 5'9", so he's stocky, and he's going to be I don't want to say a problem, but he's going to be a challenge certainly for these guys. And in that Youngstown State game, I just remember in a game like that, you just have to face the fact that you're not going to get home more often than not, because there's simply not enough time. So they're going to have to not, overshoot things when they're in the backfield, stay very oriented in their gaps, which, again, this is tough when it's the first game of the year at night and your heart's going 100 miles an hour. But I do think same key as on offense is you got to stay consistent and just do what you do, not try to do any more than that. But the linebackers, I think, are absolutely the biggest group to watch here. How do they adjust to the up-tempo, no-huddle stuff? Do they panic when things start going wrong? And how do they respond to big plays, things like that? Because Jacksonville State is going to break off some big plays. I think this is an offense that's sort of built around doing that, and it's going to happen. So I want to see how MSU responds, how the linebackers look in terms of, taking simple things, taking angles to the ball in pass coverage. What are they doing? It's going to be really interesting, and I think MSU's linebackers against their offense is the number one position to watch by far.
Yeah, it's the type of situation where you think what Marcus Rush does well will fit well here. It'll be interesting, like I mentioned, to see how Shilly Calhoun handles that. And then from Pat Narduzzi's perspective, how much do you blitz? Is it even worth it? And if you're not blitzing as much, are your linebackers being forced to react more and not maybe reacting as well? So it's a really interesting dynamic. And the more you think about it, it really is the perfect setup for the Oregon game next week.
Yep.
If MSU loses, then maybe you think differently. But in terms of preparation, this is everything you're going to need to get ready for next week at a higher scale. So
yeah, it couldn't have worked out any better.
Yeah. So it'll be. It's got. I guess we can kind of move on to predictions here. It's the type of game.
We didn't get to special teams yet. Tell me about Jacksonville State's long snapper.
Oh.
I'm just messing with you.
So it's the type of game where, I don't know, you don't want to say Jacksonville State has much of a chance, but they're a team that knows what they do, and they do it really well. The first game dynamic, the new coaching staff dynamic could be interesting. Could this game get into a shootout? You don't figure with MSU's defense, but you have to feel pretty safe about MSU winning this one, especially with what they can do offensively to match if that was the case. But how do you see this playing out?
Well, I think one thing MSU wants to do is, I know we've heard a lot of talk about, them coming out explosive and having these big plays on offense, but to me, this is a game where you just want to pound the ball. I mean, you've got to, and like you said, those guys are big up front, as you have to be in a 3-4 defense. You got a big, strong defensive lineman. But I think Michigan State, ideally, rips off some long drives, kind of picks up 4, 5, 6 yards of carry, then breaks a big one, hits some outs. You all right over there?
Yep.
Hits some short passing routes and things like that. Really sort of controls the clock just to keep their offense off the field, because they do try to push that pace so much. I believe I know a lot of casinos haven't listed this game due to the fact that they're an FCS school. I believe I've seen MSU as a 31-point favorite somewhere. I think that's a little too many because, like I said, I think they're really going to try to grind it out and slow down the game a little bit. But I don't know. How are we going to do this? Are we doing score predictions?
Yeah, well, a couple more things. You mentioned the pace there. It'll be interesting to see how much MSU pulls guys in and out. They like to do it on the line, especially, but maybe John Reschke gets in there for a series or a few snaps, depending on how things are going.
He'll have to. He'll definitely play, and I think Riley Bulla will too. Both of those guys, because of how fast Jacksonville State moves, I think both of those guys will get pretty significant playing time.
Yeah, and Spartan Rocky made a good point in his preview about this is probably the second toughest non-conference game they have. You would probably put Jacksonville State up definitely against Eastern, but probably even Wyoming. I think in the end that might end up being the case where this comes out as the second toughest non-conference game. But again, it's a good style preparation for the next one. And you got the feeling. I'm gonna, along with the score prediction, I'll say Jacksonville State scores points on their first drive. And it's always the most vulnerable MSU's defense is the first drive of the game because, Pat Narduzzi wants to see what you got and then adjusts. So it'll be interesting. I'll say Jacksonville State scores on their first drive, whether it's the first drive of the game or MSU starts with the ball. Not sure, but that'll be one little prediction in there. But for a score prediction, I'll go maybe 35-13.
35-13?
Yeah, what do you think?
That's pretty close to what I had, so I'll change it up a little bit. I will go 38-20. I think Jacksonville State will score in this game. Maybe that's giving them a little too much credit, but a lot of different moving pieces on defense, and we'll see how they do. So I guess, are we going to keep track of these picks all year? Are we going to make it like a contest?
Yeah, we can do that. I'll write them down after or something like that, or we can keep track of them.
We'll have to agree on a wager.
We can figure that out after, I guess.
All right. How about if I win, you have to wear a Jay Cutler jersey to the next press conference?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be too many press conferences, so I don't know when that would be able to go through. We could put like dinner or something on it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll figure something out.
That's a better way to go. So yeah, it'd be an interesting game Friday night. I don't think there's really any notable games Friday. I think MSU-Jacksonville State could be the most interesting game.
Yeah, for sure.
So how about a season prediction? What's your record for MSU? What do you think their losses are, assuming they are fewer than the number of wins, and where do they end up?
Okay, looking at the schedule, really the Oregon game is the only one you look at that is, I guess, where you don't look at that game and say MSU should win that game. Obviously, a few of them, Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan, those are always, I don't want to say coin flips, but those are always tough games. But looking throughout the conference schedule, there's not a game where you go, oh boy, that's going to be, Michigan State's going to have a hard time winning that one. And because of that, I am going to say I've been going back and forth on 11-1 and 10-2 all fall. I still don't know that I've arrived at a decision there. But since you put me on the spot, what the heck? I'll say 11-1, and it wouldn't totally shock me to see them win at Oregon and then drop a Big Ten game. I just think that this offense should really bring something to the table early in the season that we didn't see very much of last year until the year kind of went on. And I think they physically match up with any team on their schedule. They match up talent-wise. Now, you have to kind of create your own breaks and create your own luck as they did all of last year. But, yeah, I think it's going to be another big season.
Well, I think the most impressive part of last year was winning every Big Ten game by double digits.
Yeah, and it didn't really seem like that.
No, because they didn't necessarily run away from teams, but it was never as close as it felt.
Yeah.
But my prediction is 10-2. I think they lose the Oregon game, and they lose one Big Ten game, a road game, whether it be Indiana, Maryland, or Penn State.
Okay, going against the grain a little bit there. I like it.
I think those are three secretly tough road games. I think maybe they'll drop one, but I think they'll beat Michigan. I think 10-2 will win them the division. Whoever they play out of the West, I think they'll put them at 11-2, and then end up in one of the non-playoff BCS type of bowls.
Okay.
So, Big Ten. Let me pull up the divisions again, so I got the full team. What are you thinking for how the divisions will finish in order. You don't need to give me records because I guess the numbers can, they got to add up. But in terms of how they go, 1 to 6 on each side, I'll say in the East, I'll say MSU. MSU comes in first. Michigan second. Ohio State third. Maybe they tie. Indiana fourth. Penn State fifth. Rutgers sixth. I think Indiana's got, again, a pretty tough schedule, but they've just got so much talent on offense, and you got to figure the defense. They return like 20 starters, so you got to figure the defense has to be a little bit better, and at least enough to get them to decent bowl. Penn State obviously won't be bowl eligible. In the West, it's tough. I know a lot of people are buying Wisconsin, especially because of that schedule. I don't think they're that good of a team. They have to replace their entire front seven on defense. The quarterback situation's up in the air. The receiver situation's up in the air. All we know they have is good running backs, offensive line like they always do, and I think they'll be pretty good in the defensive backfield. Iowa, I know, is a popular pick. Iowa gets Wisconsin at home, I think, toward the end of the year.
Yep.
So I'll say Iowa wins the West.
Okay.
With Wisconsin and Nebraska right on their tails behind them there. Northwestern in fourth, which I actually would have put them higher, maybe even in a spot to win it, if not for losing their, I think, top receiver plus Venrick Mark a couple weeks back. That's a
not only their top receiver, one of the top receivers in conference. He was really good.
and then Venrick Mark, that whole weird situation, and then Illinois and Purdue coming up there. I think Illinois could surprise.
I do too.
Their offense started out really strong, and then I know struggled in Big Ten play, but now they got Wes Lunt there, who, based on what he did 1 year at Oklahoma State, looked really good as a freshman. I think he'll be really good in this offense. I think they could upset some teams, but it's.
Well, it's like it's kind of like what we were saying about it. The defense can't be worse. You know what I mean? Like, it's impossible for the defense to be worse than it was last year. So there's a glimmer of hope there in Champaign.
Yeah. So in the West, MSU, Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State.
That's the East.
Oh, East and
or the Legends. I don't know. These are all very confusing.
Yeah, I realized I left out Maryland, which for another team is an interesting situation. I'll still say MSU, Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers. In the East, in the West, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, Northwestern, Illinois, Purdue. God, there's a lot of teams in this conference. What do you think?
It's getting bigger every year, it seems. Okay, I agree with a lot of what you said. In terms of the East Division, I'm not as high on Michigan as some people are. I just think that offensive line was so bad a year ago. And it
didn't look great in their last scrimmage either.
No.
But my biggest thing with Michigan is just some common sense, I feel like, would go really far for that offense. Like, what was it, 30-something carries against Penn State for 1 yard a carry? Like, if it's not working, I feel like Doug Nussmeier won't do it. He'll at least get away from that. And I feel like that really plagued the offense last year. Offensive line, again, seems to be a big question, which is why I wouldn't be surprised if they lose quite a few that maybe they shouldn't. But I feel like there's enough talent there, and I feel like their defense will be pretty good. They may have the number 2 defense in the conference.
Defense is getting better, and Devin Funchess is as good a weapon as you'll have on offense in the conference. Aside from that, I don't think they'll protect well enough for Devin Gardner. And I think, look, we saw him get beat up as the year went on last year and was a shell of his former self. I don't know why people think that will be so much different. I understand a new coordinator brings excitement. also understand that Fitz Toussaint is no longer your starting tailback, who was possibly the worst running back I have ever seen in pass protection.
You know what I just read on Twitter?
What's that?
He looks like he's going to make the Baltimore Ravens practice squad.
Practice squad. Okay.
Something like 7 carries for 60 yards, which is outside of that 1 year, like better than anything he did at Michigan.
Yeah. Well, he couldn't block his way out of a wet paper bag. But so Derek Green, I think obviously everyone's excited about Derek Green. We'll see what he can do. I just think it's like every year with Michigan, it's, well, this has got to be better this year. I think this is the year that Hoke starts to, and at a certain point, it's just like, are we looking at them objectively or not? I mean, I think that still happens. I don't even think it's a conscious thing on several people's parts. It's just that tradition of Michigan, you just sort of get the feeling that they're due and they can't stay down forever. And I'm not saying they're going to be bad this year. I just don't think they're going to be competing for a division title. I certainly don't think they'll win 10 games like I've seen a lot of people pick. And right now, I guess I would have them third in the East behind behind Ohio State. But it would not shock me if, say, Penn State or maybe even Indiana has a crazy year and upsets them. But right now, I guess going down the line, I would go Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Indiana, Rutgers, and Maryland. It doesn't really mean you need to flip those two either way.
I think Maryland's got some weapons, at least offensively, where I think they might surprise. I mean, I believe they made a bowl last year, maybe not. I know Rutgers made a bowl, but with Michigan, the biggest thing, I think the reason one reason they get the benefit of the doubt is, like you said, you figure this has to be the year or whatever. I think the other part, at least for me, is potential. I know recruiting rankings, blah blah blah, whatever, and I know it's all about player development, but they do have talent there. They've just not turned it into anything.
And shouldn't that be shouldn't that be even more troubling? The fact that they haven't done that consistently.
That's right, and that's why I brought up. I could see them winning 10 games. I could see them winning 7 games. I just think Nussmeier. Right. I just think Nussmeier will bring enough common sense to at least not put them in a bad situation like they were far too often last year. But again,
you'd think
it's all up front. It didn't look very good in their last scrimmage. I do think their defense could be pretty good. I think they might have end up having the number 2 defense in the conference. Apparently Greg Madison's blitzing more, which is something they need to do because they don't ever get to the quarterback with 4 guys. But they got a really experienced and talented linebacker core, and same in the defensive backfield. So that I think Nussmeier and a very manageable schedule factor into that. They get Penn State at home. Notre Dame's without quite a few guys, although I think that'll still be a pretty tough game, but they're missing quite a few guys. And again, they don't have to play Nebraska, they don't have to play Wisconsin, they don't have to play Iowa.
It's a very favorable schedule.
Yes,
I just think that based on what they've done, they shouldn't get the benefit of the doubt in all these games like they do when we're looking through and picking them game by game. I mean,
had Braxton Miller not gotten hurt, I don't even think you'd hear much talk about them. I think the doors opened a little bit for them, and people want to open it a little bit more and see what's there.
I just think top to bottom, Ohio State is still a much better program right now.
I think losing Braxton Miller right now for them is the worst possible time because you're replacing most of that offensive line and the running back. So that Navy game is sneakily difficult. Navy almost beat Ohio State a few years back up there in Columbus. So
that's right.
That'll be an interesting one to watch. Ohio.
That was the Luke Fickell year, right?
No, I think it was 2009. Because I remember I was in the press box at Spartan Stadium. I think
Okay.
maybe it was 2011. I'm not sure. But uh, so I think MSU is rightfully the heavy favorite. I don't give I think Michigan could finish second in the division, but I don't give them much of a chance at Spartan Stadium at all.
Yeah.
So I think that ends up being the not even the decider in the division because I have MSU only losing one conference game, but East is now really wide open for that spot behind MSU, and a lot of question marks across really the entire conference outside of MSU.
Yeah, like picking between like Indiana, Penn State, and Maryland. It's
Yeah,
like, what do we really know about these teams? I'm not confident that any of them will be all that good. And it's kind of, moving on to the West, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you've got your established top three in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. I think those are all pretty interchangeable. I actually like Nebraska to win the West this year and surprise some people, with Iowa second, Wisconsin third. And then after that, Minnesota, we were talking about this before, didn't look great tonight, but like I said, I think they've sucked in every single season opener for like the past 5 or 6 years. They always play on a Thursday night. It always seems like they're in a tight game late. I don't know how that works, but Northwestern with the personnel, Illinois with the defense that couldn't stop a Pee Wee team last year, and Purdue, who opens the season against Western Michigan in a battle of 1-11 teams from 2013. What a clash of the Titans that will be.
that's going to be a tough one. PJ Fleck, the Western Michigan head coach, I talked to him at MAC Media Day, and he said I asked him to clarify this. He said he could start for as many as 14 true freshmen, which is just unreal. I mean, they brought in the best recruiting class maybe in MAC history,
Yeah.
and he admitted that it's going to be another tough year for them. But that's an ugly number. And
It is.
Purdue, I mean, they got Danny Etling, who seems pretty promising, but outside of that, there's just not a lot there.
Not a lot of excitement in the Daryl Hazel era thus far.
No, and it's partly personnel, it's partly the style of play they're going to do, which I was kind of surprised they went the Trussell Ball route because you usually need top line players to do that, and Purdue's never really had that. But so you're picking Nebraska. What do you think about Wisconsin? They play LSU tomorrow in a pretty hyped up game that I'm not giving them much of a chance in. But what do you? I don't even think LSU is all that great either. I picked LSU 24-10. Thanks to be an ugly game, but I don't think Wisconsin's all that great. What do you think about the Badgers?
I don't either, and we seem to. It's like they're like the anti-Michigan. Like every year we say, they'll come down to earth, and then they go out and compete for the division, and they just seem to always replace a guy. So they'll have a decent rushing attack, and I think that maybe the defense won't be quite as good, but overall, a pretty decent team that will compete for the division through October. And in terms of the LSU game, I think they've got a chance. I'm not counting them out immediately. I think that's going to be like a one-score game, and I think LSU beats them by a touchdown.
Since we were talking about Michigan earlier, they got Appalachian State on Saturday for.
Who scheduled that game and thought it would be a good idea? I just don't understand.
I read. It's ridiculous, and I read some stuff on that, and Dave Brandon made the point that it's got people talking about Michigan. They're on. I think it's on ESPN2 the game, but it's like everybody's recounting what is to them one of their worst memories ever. Like no one's gonna. Like 10 years from now, no one's going to be like, oh, remember when Appalachian State beat Michigan? You're not going to be like, yeah, but Michigan beat them, a few years later, so it was all even. Like, no. I mean, I know Appalachian State's, I think they're a FBS team this year, if not this year, the next year. But Appalachian State has a new coach either this year or he's in his second year. It's not the same guy anymore. They don't have a couple of NFL talents like they do, I don't expect it to be all that close nor exciting, but I expect to see that blocked field goal played over a zillion times. I've already seen it a zillion times this week. Last I saw, they still had like about 1,500 tickets available as of just a couple days ago. You could buy 99 seats in a section. I don't think it'll be short of 100,000. I think it'll be full. But I think they got really, really close to it not being full. And if they play that game boringly and lose to Notre Dame, maybe the crowd starts thinning out. But
sure. Quick story, and then we'll wrap this up. So for that 2007 Appalachian State game, I was actually at Spartan Stadium, which was the first game of the D'Antonio.
It was my first game as a student.
Yeah, it was not my first game as a student, but I was in the student section, and my friends and I saw the halftime score, Appalachian State and Michigan, and we left Spartan Stadium and sprinted to BW3, just thinking we've got to see this.
That's a long ways. I went.
Well, maybe we sprinted to a cab or something.
My dad was texting me updates, and after the game, we were starting to rush out to catch the end of it, and then looked like it was over, so I just started walking. Then he texted me. They blocked a field goal, so me and my buddies, we ran to Wonders Hall, and we watched it in the Wonders Hall lobby there.
Yeah, so we were at BW3, and we were going nuts. It was possibly the biggest upset in college football history. And at one point, like right after the game, this guy comes over to our table and says, "Hey guys, would you mind keeping it down over here? My buddy's a Michigan fan over here." And we thought he was joking. Like, yeah, all right. And we just kind of kept doing our thing. We've been tailgating for a long time. We weren't being obnoxious by any means. We were just going, "Oh my God, they lost to Appalachian State." And eventually, like, the guy came over again and was really upset. Like, his buddy, I don't know if he'd been crying or what, but his friend was not in good shape, and he started yelling at us. And then, we didn't really know what to do. We're in East Lansing. Everyone's going nuts, but, words were said, and then I think we all got kicked out, which is just, I still can't get over the fact that we were kicked out of a East Lansing restaurant for cheering for one of the greatest upsets in college football history. That still strikes a weird chord with me, but anyways, it's probably too much information for everyone.
It almost ties into MSU in the sense that they play Oregon in week 2, and this is a pretty good FCS team coming in. I don't know. I don't think MSU's overlooking them. I do think Michigan overlooked Appalachian State, but interesting comparisons, because that, off another little tangent, that Appalachian State game, the first game in BTN's history, kicked off just the craziest season ever in college football, 2007. That was the year you had Boston College reach number 2, South Florida reached number 2, I think Cal reached number 2, Kentucky reached number 2. I think they were 6-0, 6-1. They ended up the year 6-6. South Carolina started 6-1, reached top 10, went 6-6, didn't reach a bowl game. Because that MSU team that year, 7-5, they played a team that ended up having the number 1 pick in Matt Ryan and was ranked number 2 earlier in the year. That was the year Pitt beat West Virginia at the end of the year to cost Rich Rodriguez a shot at the national championship. Who knows how history goes if that doesn't happen. I watched that game with a West Virginia fan, and I'd never seen a guy so just like empty. I remember Ohio State won at Michigan, and they had roses in their mouth, figuring they're going to the Rose Bowl. Well, then a bunch of crazy upsets happened, and somehow Ohio State's in the national championship game again. And a 2-loss Les Miles team winning that national championship really was the perfect ending to the craziest college football season ever.
Yeah, but, that was a nice little recap there.
But it's here finally, the 2014 season. It was a long off season. I'm fired up for everything to get going. I was just having a blast watching games tonight. Got MSU tomorrow, then got a fun slate of Saturday games. You excited, Dan?
I'll tell you what I'm excited about, Chris. 24/7 Sports is offering a free 30-day trial on Spartan Tailgate right this very moment. You can go check that out at michiganstate.247sports.com with kickoff just a day, well, I guess a couple hours away when you're listening to this. Now's the perfect time for all the latest on the football team. Recruiting-wise, we've got it all, and yeah, I'm fired up. Let's do it.
And Spartan Rocky's great numerical and personnel previews. A lot of the stuff, if you become a VIP member, highly recommended. You won't get anything more in depth in recruiting than you will in the Red Cedar Rumblings. We've got a new one up there today, so check that out. So
if you liked War and Peace, you will definitely love Spartan Rocky's game previews.
So we're not quite sure yet if we're going to make this a 2-a-week thing or 1-a-week thing. It may depend on the week. If MSU loses to Jacksonville State, we'll probably have one early next week. If they blow them out, probably not. We may take this on a week-by-week thing. Not totally sure yet. Kind of see how things play out. But glad those of you who chimed in have enjoyed the podcast so far. Hopefully we continue to bring you an entertaining hour or so during the season. So let's get things kicked off. And thanks for sticking through here with us. And have a good football weekend. For Dan, this is Chris. And take care, everybody. Talk to you next week.
See ya.